Phillip. So in this video, we're going to talk about Niall McNeil and Marcus Youssef's play, King Arthur's Knight. This is a really interesting intertextual and metatheatrical play. The actual plot of much of the play itself follows generally with the Arthur myth. We have the affair between Lancelot and Guinevere. We have the conflict between Arthur and Mordred. We have the quest for the Grail, etc., etc. So the basic pieces of the Arthur story are there. But what I actually find really fascinating... there's two major things I find really fascinating about this particular adaptation. One is the introductory section, the meta-theatrical and intertextual elements. And the other is that this is a play that foregrounds disability performance. So I'm going to talk about both of those things. So one sort of thing, one meta-theatrical thing, even sort of prior to the play starting, is that the authors, McNeil and Youssef, play two of the main characters. McNeil plays King Arthur and Youssef plays Merlin. So we've got that element right from the beginning. We've also got a sort of absurdist approach to location, because in the section on setting and time here, it says, the play takes place in a mythical past, the present and somewhat fluid combination of the two in and around the kingdom of Camelot, which in this case is not too far from Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia. So this isn't necessarily sort of straight intertextuality as such, but it breaks down the illusion of realism. So this is a Brechtian technique. This idea of like destroying the willing suspension of disbelief that the audience might have. Like, if we're picturing Camelot set in British Columbia, like, this is clearly not the English, Celtic, French romance of the medieval period, when none of the authors of the original Arthur legends knew about British Columbia. So we've got, again, this great Brecht calls it the alienation effect, or the distancing effect. So we've got that set up through the set here. But we've also got intertextuality and multimedia performance that really sort of breaks up any illusion we might have that we're seeing reality on the stage. So, for instance, in the opening section, I'm going to come back to the opening section because there's some other important things here as well. But at one point, Arthur from off stage yells, "Merlin, what are you doing?" And Merlin says, "I'm doing my very..." So, to make the part that I'm going to come back to is Merlin sort of giving us some background about the play, about the kingdom, etc., etc. So Arthur yells, "Merlin, what are you doing?" Merlin says, "I'm doing my very important contextual introduction to the play, my lord." Arthur says, "Get on with the show." Merlin says, "Yes, my lord." Then to the musicians off stage, he says, "Veda, Sky, you guys can come in." Arthur says, "Merlin, they did not pay to see you, they paid to see me." Merlin says, "That's probably true, my lord, and so I think right now it might be a good time for you to..." Arthur says, "Kneel before me." Merlin says, "Yes, my lord, why don't you make your entrance right now, my liege?" Merlin kneels, music, King Arthur makes a grand royal entrance and sits on his throne. Arthur says, "Merlin, slideshow." Merlin says, slideshow. Yes, of course. And then he rolls out a projector and computer on a card. So we get, in this opening section, we have these clear meta-theatrical references to this is a performance, the audience has paid, X thing is what they're interested in seeing. Arthur, not Merlin. As well as the actual inviting of the on-stage musicians onto the stage itself. So we've got all of these elements that clearly tell us you're watching a play. We, the actors, know that you're watching a play. You know that you're watching a play. We're not going to pretend that this is reality. So again, this is that Brechtian alienation technique, which, according to some of the disability theater scholars that I've read, is actually a pretty common technique for disability theater. And we'll come back to that later on. So we get some slide projections, most of which are drawn from McNeil's research into the Arthur legends. But we also get this one section. It starts with the stage direction, projection, image, Uther Pendragon from the TV show Merlin. Arthur says, my dad, Uther. Merlin says, Pendragon. Arthur says, you know it. I was his son. Then I was Prince Arthur. He gave me his sword. He's in here. Points to his chest. Dad. Merlin says, right. Wow. Projection, image, Guinevere from the TV show Merlin. Yeah. Arthur says, that's from Merlin, the TV show. I directed that. Merlin says, you directed the TV show Merlin? Cool. And who is that? Arthur says, Guinevere. She's my wife. She's not that kind of actor, but that's Guinevere. Merlin says, that's not the actor who plays Guinevere in our show. Arthur says, Tiffany. Merlin says, right, Tiffany is our Guinevere. Although I do like that this Guinevere is an actor of color. Arthur says, so anyways. Merlin says, dismiss my actor of color moment. Go right ahead. Let me find the cast list here real quick. So the person who played Guinevere in the original performance run at the Berkeley Street Theatre in Toronto was Tiffany King. So when we get that reference here, Tiffany is our Guinevere, we have, again, this sort of Brechtian moment where we're drawing attention to the different actors who have played particular roles. Again, breaking any illusion that the audience might develop, any willing suspension of disbelief they might have about the actor as the actual character. We get this again in a little bit, because we get a picture of Richard Gere, shirtless and sexy in American Gigolo. And Arthur says, that's Richard Gere in First Night. Merlin says he was Lancelot in the movie First Night. Arthur says, I directed that too. Merlin says, right, of course. Arthur says, he's Billy Marchensky. Merlin says, Billy Marchensky is Lancelot in our production. Arthur says, no, Billy Marchensky is Richard Gere in our production. Merlin says, that's hilarious. He's Billy Marchensky playing Richard Gere playing Lancelot. I think that's actually kind of true. In Vancouver, Billy is about as Richard Gere as you can get. So, I mean, it's these like fun, playful things that sort of introduce these ideas of these are actors, this is a performance, we're playing here. And we're playing both in the sense of acting and in the sense of having fun with this. Because again, this idea of like, in Vancouver, Billy is about as Richard Gere as you can get. Like, this is a hilarious line. So we have these very funny interactions, and it's driven by meta-theatricality and awareness of other productions of the Arthur story, particularly the TV show Merlin and the movie First Night, both of which Arthur, or Niall McNeil, claims to have directed. So we've got all of this stuff going on. The other component of the play that I think is really striking is these very subtle, often these moments that you could ignore if you weren't sort of on the lookout for them, in which the politics of disability theater or the particular practices that McNeil and Youssef used to put together both King Arthur's Knight and Peter Panti's, the particular production method that they use, get referenced in this play. So going back to the prologue, the very, very beginning of the show, Merlin comes out, and one of the things he says is, "This kingdom may be somewhat different than is natural for you to expect." Again, we've already seen these sort of Brechtian elements. "It's guided by different rules. It demands somewhat unorthodox methods, and stage directions say, referring to someone off stage. Because the king is powerful, he offers us access to worlds we can't normally perceive or perhaps choose not to. I ask only that you pay... I ask only that you... Sorry, this is not grammatically correct. I ask only that you pay attention, that you slow down." So this idea here, the king is powerful. Remember, so one of the things about the creation process for these two plays is that Niall McNeil largely generated the material. He largely came up with the words, the ideas, the particular structure of the plays. Marcus Youssef refined them. So he wrote everything down. He did a lot of the selection and a lot of the organization and the polishing into the final process. So Niall McNeil, who has Down syndrome, I don't think I've mentioned that yet in this video, says the king is powerful. He offers us access to worlds we can't normally perceive or perhaps choose not to. So that idea that rather than McNeil's Down syndrome being a disability, it's actually an ability. It's a positive ability that allows him to think about things in a different way than neurotypicals do. So we got that idea introduced right from the beginning. I'll come back to this reference in a little bit. But we've got another... No, I'm going to come back to that one. So we've also got a reference to the particular production process that McNeil and Youssef used. Again, this process in which they sat and talked for hours and hours and hours and hours. And McNeil generated content and Youssef refined. So we have a section here right before the portion that I read you earlier, where where Arthur asks what Merlin is doing. Merlin says, "But here I am talking again," gesturing off stage. "Chatterbox, that's what the king calls me, and these are my words. In this kingdom, my words, very little consequence. The story of this kingdom is written almost entirely from his words, the king's words. My job, well, my job is mostly to transcribe and translate, to negotiate and mitigate." So I don't know what the materials were in the programs for the original production. I don't know if there was a description in those of McNeil and Youssef's production process. Sometimes that kind of thing is included with programs, with introductory material. Sometimes it's not. In this published version, Youssef has written an introduction where he talks about that production process. So if you know that, you get this reference, this idea that the story of this kingdom is written almost entirely from his words. That's Niall McNeil's words. My job, Marcus Youssef's job, is mostly to transcribe and translate, to negotiate and mitigate. So we've got their production process laid out here. So again, this is a very sort of open and upfront representation of the production process for this particular show. And again, that's a Brechtian element, that overtness about not only that this is performance, but how this performance functions. The other reference that I particularly got, in this version of the Arthur story, there's the goat palace. So children who are born different are declared to be goats, and they are segregated out from Camelot society. So this is in scene 11, the stage directions at the beginning of scene 11. It says, "The Goat Palace, a dingy barn where the goats are forced to live. The goats rut and dance. Mordred watches them." Then a little bit later it says, you've got the choir, who are the courtiers of Camelot, who come in and watch the goats. It says, "This is a courtly tradition, voyeuristically condemning and being titillated by the transgressive behavior of Camelot's subjugated others. Shunning Mordred, who is also a goat, is part of the tradition too." So this is really striking, because in the 1700s, 1800s, even before, one thing that would often happen would be that insane asylums, which is where people with conditions like Down syndrome were also often incarcerated. But in insane asylums, the wealthy could come and look at the lunatics. And that was a popular form of entertainment for the wealthy, was to come and look at the people who were housed in these really horrendous conditions. And there's a lot of information available about the traditions of insane asylums and hospitals and things like this, and the way that they made money by displaying the inmates of those asylums. So we have that in this section. We have a reference to that, to the idea of the other, of characters who are, or not characters, of people who are in some way determined to be different and incarcerated or separated or isolated from the rest of society, who then become a form of entertainment for those who can pay to come and look at them. So we have that referenced here. The other disability theater component of this performance is mentioned here in the production note. For the purpose of reading this play, it's important to know that in the original production, King Arthur, Guinevere, Saxon, and Magwitch were played by actors whose lives include Down syndrome. Their parts, as well as improvisational sections of the script, were developed in response to the specific interests and skills each of these actors brought to the process. This included 3 years of classes at the Down Syndrome Research Foundation and multiple workshops with the whole ensemble. The remainder of the cast, musicians, and choir were all neurotypical professionals. So, in the original production run of King Arthur's Knight, you had actors with Down syndrome who were in prominent roles. I mean, these are some of the most important roles of the entire production, and they were given center stage. They were given the chance to show that they have tremendous performance skills. And actually, there are YouTube videos, trailers, and things like this from King Arthur's Knight, from that original performance run, where you can see just how fantastic these performances are.